Good morning, everyone. Song is the song that we sing at the time of the birthday of all the direct disciples and others. Today is not Nag Mahashay's birthday. Yeah, but it was nice that you sang it. Yeah, because this song written by Swami Paramahansanji mentioned all of the direct disciples and just 2 or 3, 4 of the householder disciples who were considered to belong to that same inner circle of Sri Ramakrishna. And that's kind of the theme for today. The reason why I chose this topic is that we got slightly scolded recently by one of our devotees. Yeah, why don't we talk about the householder disciples more? Because they'll be of great inspiration to most of the devotees who are householders. So I thought, that it was a very good point. So I thought that today I would talk about Nag Mahashay. Nag Mahashay was, we don't even like to think of him as a householder, but of course he wasn't one of the monastic disciples, but his life was so extraordinary that even the monks of the order would bow down in reverence to him, but he wouldn't allow them, of course. But anyhow, his life is something very, very special. So I wanted to start out with this idea of each is great in his own place. This was one of the great lectures that Swami Vivekananda gave about the monastic life, those who choose the monastic life and those who choose the householder life. And it's not a question of comparing one to the other. They have different paths in life, and they can attain to the highest level of spirituality through either the path of the householder, married, children, career, everything, playing their part in society, or renouncing everything and becoming monastic members, monks, as we've done in this order. When we look at the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna and the householder disciples, we come to understand that they represent ideals for us, and at the same time they don't represent ideals for us. That they were far greater than we can possibly imagine. As monks, we wouldn't dare compare ourselves to the direct disciples. And for householders, when they look at, say, M, they look at M, they look at this Nag Mahashay, some of the other so-called householder disciples, they find that this represents an ideal that is too great for us to think that we can reach, and yet it's something that gives us hope, and that we know that as imperfectly as we can follow it, that it gives us something that we can aspire to. So it's very, very helpful for us both to understand that there'll be things we hear about this Nag Mahashay that we know that even the greatest householder devotees among us won't be able to do, just as we know as monks that we won't be able to do it with the direct disciples. So that's not even a question. And at the same time, that we know if we strive to realize that ideal, even to a little bit, a small extent, that it'll be of great value, it'll be a great blessing to us in our lives. So these are the few points that I wanted to start out with. Okay? Yes. Okay. That we'll see that some of these householder disciples represented almost a class among themselves. That many of them possibly would have become monastic disciples. Of course, we don't know any of these things, but many of them came to Sri Ramakrishna after they were already married. M, for example, and there were several others who almost begged him to be able to renounce everything, become monks. And he said, no, you've already taken to this path. You can realize God through this path as well. So many of them had the mindset of monks. Sri Ramakrishna seemed to want to leave some of them behind to represent this ideal, Grihi Sannyasi. He would use this term sometimes, both the householder and the monk. So this was the case with Nag Mahashay, and as I say, a few of the others, that there was something very, very special about them, that they belonged to this inner circle, we can say. They were part of this divine play, this Leela of Sri Ramakrishna, and we stand in awe and reverence before them, and at the same time, we try to catch just a little bit and try to emulate them as far as possible in this lifetime. They had the touch of Sri Ramakrishna, and with some of them, Holy Mother also, and we don't know if it was that made them great, or because they were great, they were born at that time, and they were pulled at that time like a magnet. When Sri Ramakrishna was born with the Holy Mother, that the direct disciples, these were all, whether they're all Ishwarakotis or they're all playmates in this Leela, Leela Sahajaris. Somehow they were born at that time for that special purpose. And yet, when they came to Sri Ramakrishna, something was clearly awakened within them. Anyhow, what we see from their lifetime is the truth of God realization. This is the one thing that, unless we see it in living examples, especially again with the householders, because there's a terrible bias that most devotees have, that it's not for us. Well, the monks can have it, but not for householders. That they'll have to be born again as monks. It's a bias, and I have to say it's a bias that belongs to the Orthodox tradition as well. It's not just a modern thing. That the very Orthodox tradition, you have to be Brahmin, you have to be male, you have to be a sannyasin. This goes very much against what Sri Ramakrishna taught, what we read in Bhagavad Gita and everything. So when we see that these householders also attain to that state, then we get some conviction. We get conviction that these things are true and that they can be realized directly if we have that same type of dedication to spiritual life. And with many of them, it's through not so much long hours of deep meditation and everything, but through simplicity and truthfulness and sincerity. And we'll see in the case with Nag Mahashay, through tremendous humility, the absolute absence of any ego, and just this tremendous longing for God realization. Now, there's another point. These were all what we can call huge vessels. Ramakrishna used this term adhar. He would talk about a receptacle, that some are huge receptacles. The best example, of course, was Swami Vivekananda, that they could absorb tremendous amounts of spiritual ecstasy and joy and everything. We are smaller receptacles, but it's an advantage for us because it doesn't take us so much to fill us up. A little bit of this spiritual joy and everything, and we'll be overflowing. So this is a bit of an advantage for us. This is Kali Yuga. We hear that in this Kali Yuga, that it's much more difficult to realize God, have spirituality and everything. But Sri Ramakrishna says the opposite. In this Kali Yuga, all we have to do is weep for God for 3 days, practice honesty for 12 years. So there's some advantages to all of that. Anyhow, this is only to make sure that when we read the lives of these great souls, that we get some enthusiasm and optimism, not that we say, oh, now I know it's absolutely impossible for me. This is only for these very rare souls. So we have to at least understand that much, that no, we won't try to become exactly like them, that they've, through grace of Sri Ramakrishna or just their good samskaras, that these are very special people. At the same time, we'll see that they've left a blueprint for us, what we have to do to try to attain just a fraction of what they were able to realize in their lives. So we see with these householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna that this line between monastic and householder gets very much blurred. And for Sri Ramakrishna, he thought that even a husband and wife, after they reach a certain point, then they start to emulate the monastic ideal. That after a while, they'll live like brother and sister. This will be that retirement stage of life and everything. But we see the perfect example was Sri Ramakrishna himself. He was married. He had a wife, Holy Mother. Not the way we normally think of husband and wife. But he never abandoned her. He never abandoned his own mother. The strict Orthodox sannyasins, they won't even serve the family members. He kept his mother with him at the end, served her day and night. Holy Mother. And Holy Mother herself was even a greater example of combination of householder and, in her case, nun. Because she fulfilled all of the duties, far more than most people would, with regard to raising those who weren't even her own children, her nieces, and she had 4 brothers who survived that caused her so much trouble and everything. So we have this example, even with Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, that one can fulfill the duties of the householder life and at the same time dedicate one's whole life to a God realization. So this was the case, I would say, specifically with M, the compiler of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath Gupta. He was the one that practically begged Sri Ramakrishna to be able to renounce the world. And Thakur said, no, you'll remain, you'll represent a new type of ideal for people. The mindset of the monk, but living in the setting of the householder. And this was certainly the case with Nag Mahashay. And if you think that I'm exaggerating the greatness of Nag Mahashay, let me just read a quote from Swami Vivekananda. He said, I've traveled many places in the world, but nowhere have I come across a soul as great as Nag Mahashay. He is greater than us, meaning all of the monastic disciples. He is greater than us in renunciation and self-control. So I'll say a few words about the life of Nag Mahashay. He was born, Durgachara Nag was his name, later known as Nag Mahashay, and he was born on August 21st in 1846. He was born in a village by the name of Deobhog. It's what is now Bangladesh today, and there's a town of Narayanganj not far from Dhaka, and this Deobhog is very close to that Narayan. We have an ashram there, and several of us went there. Yeah, not how many years ago? We went for the Banyachang temple opening. That was 2008, I think. No, it was a while ago. Yeah. Anyhow, it's a great place of pilgrimage. There's a trust, the family runs it. They keep it very beautifully, and many, many pilgrims go there. So, growing up, this Nag Mahashay, he had to experience many deaths in his lifetime. There were 4. There were 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and 1 brother and 1 sister passed away, so he was the only son who was left. And then when he was only 8 years old, his mother died. And he was raised by one of his aunts, because his father, Deen Dayal, he would often go to Kolkata for work, so he wasn't around. So mostly raised by this one aunt, and she was very typical what we hear about And what Swamiji loved about the women of old India, that sitting on her lap, he would learn the stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana, just as we hear about Swamiji and his mother. So he had this wonderful upbringing through the benefit of his aunt, and he was very much influenced by her. He grew up to be very modest and very truthful. His humility and truthfulness were really defining features of his life. He would never tell a lie, and for that reason, everybody trusted him. If there were any questions came up, any decisions to be made, all of his friends, they would consult him. They would ask his opinion because they knew that he would be very honest and open and sincere in everything. He was a good student. He completed 8th grade in his village school, and then they sent him to Kolkata for higher education. But his father was poor, and this was another thing. He couldn't bear to see anything, money spent on him or anything for himself. It was a perfect self-abnegation. So he refused to go there, and he went back to a school in Dhaka, which meant walking 10 miles each way every day. He would walk back and forth, 10 miles in the morning, 10 miles in the evening, and everybody thought it was too much for him, but he didn't mind. He only missed 2 days, they said, the whole time he was in school. The teachers were so impressed with him that they offered to give him a place to stay and money and everything there, so he didn't have to go back and forth. But he said no, he didn't mind. He enjoyed it and everything, so everything remained like that. And even as a boy, he showed tremendous maturity and interest in spiritual life, and he wrote several essays that were later published in a pamphlet, Advice to Boys, Bengali, of course. When he reached his 15th birthday, then, as was the custom, they arranged a marriage for him. And the wife was 11 years old, which meant that it was like an engagement. But in those days, it wasn't really a marriage. It was like an engagement. And as soon as the ceremony was performed, the young girl went back to her parents. Generally, that was the custom until she grew up. This is exactly what happened with Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. She didn't come to him until she was 18. He came to Dakshineshwar at that time. Then within a short time, within 5 months of that, Durgachandra moved to Calcutta because his father was going to stay there permanently, and he started medical studies. He was studying to be a doctor. For some reason, he gave that up, but got involved with homeopathy. And somehow he developed some knack for diagnosing cases and gained some type of reputation. He made some very remarkable cures in some cases. People were very grateful to him. And he could have made a lot of money. There were people who offered him money, but he wouldn't accept anything more than he thought was the value of the work that he did. And if there were people who couldn't afford it, he wouldn't take any money from them. So very often, he treated poor patients free or gave them money and paid for their food and medicine. So people took advantage of him. He was very simple, and he didn't mind at all. He was such a pure soul. So he really practiced the teaching of Swamiji that to worship God through service of others before Swamiji even gave voice to that teaching. This was something spontaneous and natural for him. So as I said, because they were so young that he rarely saw his wife, there were a few times that he would go to his father-in-law's home, and those times he wouldn't sleep in the same room. He would spend the night in a tree. Now, I don't know if they had some type of tree house or what they did, but passes the night on the limb of the tree, and because he had this feeling that one should not enter into married life until one was really grounded in spirituality. And he had this really great belief in this practice of brahmacharya. So for him, there was no question, even though wife had probably, I don't know how many years later this is, but the time to consummate a marriage. But he absolutely refused all of this. And he was reading about this, the greatness of brahmacharya, and that he learned from reading Mahabharata and Ramayana and everything, that was a great ideal for him. Now, before the wife really became, they were ready to start a marriage, she died. So the wife died at a very young age, and it was a great shock to him. It's not that he was indifferent to her. He felt that they were both still young, but anyhow, it was a great shock to him. And he became more and more introspective, spent more time study of the scriptures. Some nights he would spend entirely in the cremation ground. He was a kind of a shakta in his spiritual practice, and he developed a very firm conviction that higher realization was the one goal in life. So this great dispassion came to him. We've seen so many times, Swamiji's father died, even Sri Ramakrishna's father died, that this is the time when people start to question things. And spending nights in the cremation ground, this was a common type of a place for meditation. Shiva himself is supposed to do this, that this will bring tremendous dispassion, and will understand this life will not go on forever. There'll come a time we leave everything behind us. Now the father saw what was happening to the mind of Nag Mahashay, and he thought, let me arrange a second marriage. Now Nag Mahashay was very much against it, and probably had some feeling that it was something inauspicious to arrange a marriage for him. He said, one young girl has already gone to the jaws of death. You want to make a second one do that? So father was more or less ready to give up the idea, but he became so distraught. He said, what will happen to my son? No one to look after him and everything, that Nag Mahashay would find him really weeping at times and beside himself with anxiety. So he agreed to a second marriage, even though he had really no inclination at this time. So he went back to Deobhog, his village, and the marriage was arranged with one Sharat Kamini. And as soon as the marriage was done, then he left again. Now the Sharat Kamini, I don't want to compare Nag Mahashay and his wife to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, but they were in that mold, in that same mold. She was a very, very pure and pious girl. I'm sure she was also young at that time, but Nag Mahashay asked her the same question that Thakur asked Holy Mother, that you're my wife, you have some say in the type of life that we lead together, but I only care to lead a spiritual life. If you're willing, we'll lead that spiritual life together. And she said, yes, I only care to be able to serve you and help you in your spiritual goals and everything. I'll also lead a type of life like that. So he went back and started to practice again as a homeopathic doctor, and once cured somebody who was very, very wealthy. It was somebody in his father's employer's home. He was offered a casket of silver as a reward, but would only accept 20 rupees or something. Father was furious. And father said that, how can you do that? We're poor. They suffered very much. But the son was adamant. He said, I won't take any more than I feel that I deserve. And he said, it's you who taught me to follow my conscience and to respect truthfulness. So life went on, and his main interest, of course, now was spirituality. And he would spend long hours in meditation, sitting on the banks of the Ganga, or going to cremation grounds, and he would start to lose himself, have some type of ecstatic experiences. And he knew that worldly life was not for him, and even career, he didn't care very much about it. He cared only for God realization. So eventually, he decided to retire from his position and return to Deobhog. And, I'm sorry, the father. The father did that. And this Nag Mahashay, he took charge of the father's duties at that time. I don't know if he had some type of business or something, but Nag Mahashay looked after everything. The daughter-in-law of the Nag Mahashay's wife, she went back to serve her father-in-law. That was the main thing for her. She knew that Nag Mahashay, that he wasn't interested in any type of typical marriage. So she went back to Deobhog, and Nag Mahashay remained in Kolkata. Now we get to Sri Ramakrishna, finally, that all of this is just on his own. None of this is having met any great holy person or anything. This is just that innate spirituality within him. But his tremendous longing for God eventually led him to the feet of Sri Ramakrishna. He had a friend named Suresh Chandra Datta who knew about Sri Ramakrishna. All of these members of the Brahmo Samaj, they had heard about Sri Ramakrishna from Keshav Chandra Sen. So they had some desire to meet him, and they went together to Dakshineshwar. Now Howrah was there. Howrah, we know, he wasn't quite as bad as Hridoy. Hridoy would actually tell lies and tell the people to go away and everything. But for some reason, when they asked, is the Paramahamsa there? Is Ramakrishna there? Howrah said no. I don't know why, that we don't find him behaving this badly, usually. He was jealous a little bit of Sri Ramakrishna. So maybe that was the reason. So he said no, he went out. So they were so terribly disappointed, but then they saw someone inside the room calling them. So they went in, and of course it was Sri Ramakrishna himself, who, it's very funny how Sri Ramakrishna, especially with Hridoy, was really scared to death of him. Yeah, I used to wonder so much, how is it possible that this Hridoy could insult the Holy Mother, and they would walk all the way back home, and Thakur wouldn't say anything. But then we see that he was really scared to death of him. And one time he said, as much as he served me, so much did he torture me. Yeah, and that was just the nature of Sri Ramakrishna. So any others, Howrah also, for some reason, didn't want them to meet them. But when Sri Ramakrishna saw them, he could recognize people. We know that. He could recognize them. And he said to Suresh, the two of them came together. He said to Suresh, did you notice he is like a blazing fire, is Nag Mahashay. He's still a young man at that time. When was he born? Anybody remember? 46. Oh, so he was only 10 years younger than Sri Ramakrishna. Then another visit, then Thakur very often would ask those who came to him, what do you think of me? Now, it wasn't that he was fishing for compliments. He could judge their level of spirituality and sensitivity to spirituality by their understanding of who he was. So this Nag Mahashay said, sir, you cannot fool me. Through your grace, I've recognized you as the Supreme Brahman. So others would say, some would say the avatar. Anyhow, he developed very quickly this tremendous reverence for Sri Ramakrishna. One day, Thakur happened to say that there are certain people who it'll be very difficult for them to realize God. Now, please don't take offense at this. He said doctors and lawyers. Yeah. Because somehow, lawyers, they're taking money sometimes for proving that people are innocent when they're not innocent. Yeah. And he didn't like this idea. Doctors is successful because people are suffering, they're taking money. Now, Nag Mahashay, he wasn't like that, of course. But as soon as he heard that, then that was the end of his even homeopathic work, that he took whatever, his medical bag and everything, threw it in the Ganges. Everyone used to do that, just throw things in the Ganga. But so that was the end of that. After that, he never had any practice. He went to Sri Ramakrishna with the intention of renouncing the world. So this was, as I say, he had the mindset of a monk the whole time he was a so-called householder. And Sri Ramakrishna, before he could say anything, he understood why he had come. And he said to him, "What harm is there in remaining a householder? Only keep your mind fixed on God. The householder's life is like fighting from a fortress. Remain in the world like the ancient king Janaka, unattached. Your life will be an example of how a householder should live." So he tried his best. He was no longer a doctor. He had some duties to do with his father's business, but he couldn't direct his mind to that anymore. And something happened that we read about in the life of Ram Prasad. Exactly the same thing, that Ram Prasad had an employer who, by mother's grace, was a great devotee of the Divine Mother. And this Ram Prasad, when he was working as a clerk, and nobody liked him because he was too honest. They were all taking bribes, and he was too honest. So they were happy to get him in trouble. They saw he was writing these songs in the name of all the songs to Mother Durga and Kali and everything. And they took them to this employer, thinking that he'll get fired. And his boss started reading these things, and tears started coming. He was a great devotee. He said, "Ram Prasad, you go back to your village. I'll give you the same pay that you were getting here, and just write your songs." So he also had an employer like that who continued to give him his commission, even though he no longer worked for him at all. See how Mother provides. Cases like this. Now, there's so many incidents in the life of Nag Mahashay that show his tremendous devotion to his ideal. It was unswerving. Anything that had to do with compromise was just against his nature. And he had great sympathy and compassion for others, and we know completely eccentric from the point of view of worldly knowledge. Anyhow, he went back to his village in Deobog, and he saw that there was a cow that was tied near a pumpkin. The pumpkins were there, and this cow was straining to try to get to that pumpkin to eat some of the leaves and things like that. And somehow this Nag Mahashay, he felt tremendous compassion. There were all these tender pumpkin vines just coming up and everything. So he untied the cow. And the cow went, of course, and they ate all of the plants and everything. Father was furious. Father was still alive at that time. He said, "You don't earn any money yourself. Instead of helping out the family, you're only making matters worse. You gave up your medical practice. How will you live?" So Nag Mahashay said, "Don't worry about how I'll live. Mother will take care of me." Then the father said, "Well, you end up ultimately going naked and living on frogs." So this Nag Mahashay immediately took off all of his clothes. There happened to be a dead frog lying on the ground. He picks it up and starts eating it. And says, "Father, you don't have to worry anymore. It's already done." That'll happen one day. He said, "Now I've fulfilled both your commands. Please don't worry about my food and clothing anymore. Chant the name of God, I beg you, and don't think about the household expenses in your old age." So now the father thought the son is absolutely mad. He didn't know what he should do. So Nag Mahashay, he went back to Kolkata. His life became more and more austere, that he would be seen just wearing one torn cloth and a chadar thrown on his shoulder, hardly ate any food, got very, very thin, and wouldn't take anything with sugar or salt in it, because he wanted to teach his tongue not to have any desire for good-tasting food. He had that real austere bent in him. And he went to Sri Ramakrishna and complained again that he had not realized anything in his life. And then Sri Ramakrishna said to him, If you love this, pointing to himself, everything will be all right. Remain in the company of the holy. Then Nag Mahashay said, how will I recognize holy people? And he said, don't worry, they themselves will come and seek you out. And this is what happened when he went back to Deobhog, that he, despite his tremendous modesty and humility, he became known as a great soul at that time. And many very serious spiritual seekers would come to him and to seek advice from him. One, of course, was the Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. We know as Bengal, Swamiji's disciple, who wrote that Swami Shishyo Shambad, the talks with Swami Vivekananda, I think it's called. Nag Mahashay probably met Sri Ramakrishna on many occasions. We don't have a single recording of it in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, because he only came when there weren't too many other people there, and would come on weekends or holidays. Otherwise, he was working, and so he would stay away. He didn't like to go there when there are a lot of crowds and everything. So we don't have any recorded statements, but he came to him on many occasions. At the end, in Kashipur, he also rarely came because he couldn't bear to see the sight of Sri Ramakrishna with the terrible pain of the throat cancer. But one day he went to him, and he said to him, or Sri Ramakrishna said to him, look, you were a doctor before. Can you cure this? Like a child, he said it. So this Nag Mahashay, he said, yes, I can cure it. And thinking deeply inside that through Mother's grace, she'll transfer that to me, that cancer, and he'll be free from that cancer. Now somehow, Sri Ramakrishna knew what was in his mind. And he said, I know you have the power to cure it, but I won't allow it. See this play between the two of them. Something wonderful. When Sri Ramakrishna passed away in 1886, they were all helpless. Thakur used to say, after I passed away, you'll be wandering the streets, weeping and wailing like orphans. But aside from a Holy Mother, perhaps no one grieved for Sri Ramakrishna as much as Nag Mahashay. He was very, very much affected by all of this. He gave up food altogether and wouldn't leave his bed. And the direct disciples, they were also grieving, but they would go to him and beg him to get up somehow. And he said, no, life is not worth living. Thakur was gone and everything. So they played a trick. They knew that he loved to serve holy men. These are the direct disciples. So they said, we'd like you to serve us lunch today. Immediately he got up, and he went and got some vegetables and things and started cooking for them. But he himself wouldn't eat. They said, now you have to join us. He said, how can I offer food to this wretched body which has not yet realized God? See, he's such a highly realized soul, but that humility was there. Anyhow, eventually they convinced him, and after some time he got over to a certain extent that grief. So he went back to Deobhog. As I say, many people started coming to him. His house was starting to fall apart. He wouldn't let anybody serve him. He didn't even like to have paid workers come. Roof is leaking, everything. So he just was happy to live like that. And his wife also, she didn't seem to mind. Then there were so many different things that happened. If people would come to stay there, the only room that didn't have a leak coming down was the bedroom where they stayed. So he would give up his bedroom, and again, I don't know how they did it. They would pass the night just in meditation outside, and somehow he had this place in a tree where he could stay in different times. When he went by boat, he wouldn't allow the boatmen to row. Can you imagine? They thought he was mad. You have to pay them and everything. He himself would row the boat to cross to the other side. There was another very well-known incident that he was in Kolkata at one time, and this was a very auspicious time to bathe in the Ganga. They say it was this Ordhodaya Yoga. I don't know what it is. It comes once every 15 years. Very auspicious time. But he left and went to Deobhog just before that time, and he got a big scolding from his father. His father said people sell all their possessions. They do everything possible to be able to go to the Ganga and to take a bath at that time, and you're there already, and you came back from there. He said, what kind of religious man are you? And he says, there's still time. Take me there. Take me with you, and we'll both go and we'll bathe Ganga. So, Nag Mahashay, he said, if one has true devotion, real devotion, Mother Ganga will reveal herself in his own home. And now we hear the words of a holy man have to come true. So they saw that suddenly a spring of water started gushing out from the southwest corner of the courtyard, and everyone was amazed. And it formed a flowing stream, enough so that they could even bathe in it. Nag Mahashay heard that he didn't do it. It wasn't. He was upstairs. He came down from his room, and he bowed reverently before the water and cried out, Jai Ma Ganga. And everybody came from all around. Word spread. They all came and took a bath there. I don't know how it's possible, because it's kind of flat land if you go to see it. Yeah. But now there's even a little monument there that where people can go. A plaque is there, and people can go and see that spot where the water came. Swami Vivekananda heard about this. Now, he is a scientific man. Huh? He's not going to believe in a lot of these foolish things. But he said, the wish of a great soul like Nag Mahashay can make the impossible possible. Their infallible will can even liberate people. So there's so many stories to tell. He was fanatically against any type of violence, even against the insects or any types of animals. If snakes would come, he wouldn't allow them to be killed or even to be removed. They have every right to live here. He would just live side by side with them. Insects, he couldn't kill insects in front of him. And the other element of his life was he was tremendously devoted to Holy Mother. His devotion to Holy Mother was legendary. Of all the disciples, she herself used to say, there's only one like him. There's so many stories that he went first to see her, Holy Mother, in 1893, after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, and she was staying at the Ilambar Babu's garden house, just south of the present Belur Math area. And Holy Mother, at that time, rarely would see male devotees unless some special arrangement was made, that she would completely cover herself and they could come and they could make pranam to her and leave and everything. So he came one time and he said to the Holy Mother's attendant that he wanted to see her. So she sees he's like this madman, longing to see Holy Mother. And so the attendant goes up and says, who is this mad devotee? Now I see he's striking his head so hard on the floor that it's going to start bleeding. Just completely unconscious of his longing to see Holy Mother. And the monks and attendants, they tried to restrain him, but he wouldn't utter a word. He seemed to be unconscious. And then so they said, is he a madman? Who is this? You know who this person is? And instantly, Holy Mother knew it was Nag Mahashay. Who else will act like that? And she said, please bring him up. Somehow, he was led up in that half unconscious state. His forehead was swollen. His eyes were all puffed up, half blinded by tears. And he could hardly see Holy Mother's tears in his eyes, and just said, Ma, Ma. And Holy Mother sat him down and forgot all about her shyness, and stroked his back and placated him and tried to feed him, but he was incapable of eating. And all he could say is, Ma, Ma, Ma. And she stroked his body, head and body for some time, and then he gradually regained normal consciousness. As he was leaving, they heard him say, Mother is more compassionate than father. Meaning Holy Mother than Sri Ramakrishna. Swamiji himself used to say that sometimes. Yeah, Mother's grace is 1,000 times greater on me than Thakur. If she would give prasad, very often they would give prasad in these little leaf plates. Not soft leaf, even this is a solid leaf. It would be almost like a hard cardboard or something. He would eat all of it. Not just the prasad inside, because from her hand he would get it. If she would give him a cloth, he would never wear it as a wearing cloth. He would maybe keep it on his head. That's all, or else just keep it in a very safe, sacred place. Holy Mother had such love and regard for Nag Mahashay that he passed away before she did, that she kept a picture of him in his room along with the direct disciples, and could be seen. This is the custom in Bengal, other parts of India also, to touch the chin. So she would do that with this photograph. And she said one day, "How many devotees come here, but I see no one like him." When Swami Vivekananda came back from the West, he went to see Nag Mahashay, and he said, "Please come and stay at the Mutt. You live like one of the monks." They had such regard for him. But he refused. He said, "No, Sri Ramakrishna told me that lead the life of a devout householder in order to set an example to others." In the course of this conversation, Swamiji said to him, "It is you who have really appreciated and understood Sri Ramakrishna. We only spend our time and energy in useless wandering." Nag Mahashay had very poor health most of his life. We know that he didn't take care of himself. He didn't go to doctors. His diet was terrible. And ultimately, he came down with a bad case of dysentery. And dysentery, colic, and some other things. This is in December of 1899. And he knew he wouldn't live long. He refused all medicine. He refused all food. He would just take some greens. This is all. And this Sharat Chandra Chakravarti, I mentioned earlier, was so devoted to Nag Mahashay, he actually wanted to take initiation from him. And this Nag Mahashay said, "No, you'll get initiation from Shiva himself." Of course, that means Swamiji. But this Sharat Chandra, he went back and served this Nag Mahashay at the end of his life. And the last 2 weeks, he was with him day and night. And Nag Mahashay only wanted to hear about Sri Ramakrishna. Now, the Nag Mahashay, he never went on pilgrimage anywhere. But the Sharat Chandra went to many places. So he asked him, he said, "You please tell me about all these different places that you've seen, Hardwar, Puri, Varanasi, and everything." And he saw in his mind's eye all of the places. So he felt that he went to all of these different pilgrimages because of the descriptions of this Sharat Chandra. He consulted an almanac. He saw a particular day, and he said to them, "If you don't mind, this will be the day when I start my journey." So he chose the day that he would pass away. So December 27th, 1899, he went in and out of some type of bhava, samadhi, and the Sharat Chandra began to chant the name of Sri Ramakrishna in his ear. He brought a photograph to show him, and Nag Mahashay opened his eyes for one final vision, seeing that photograph. And he said, "Grace, grace, you have blessed me through your boundless grace." Then he entered into that final Mahasamadhi. So this is this really unique life of Nag Mahashay. What we learn from his life is that one can have the highest realization through this absolute self-abnegation, through the sincerity and simplicity and complete lack of ego. You know, they say that this net of Maya was incapable of holding Swamiji and Nag Mahashay, because Swamiji, like a lion, could just break through. Nag Mahashay would become so small he could go through the meshes of the net. So this is what we learn from his life, that if one can be perfectly free from pride and ego and live a pure, dedicated type of life, that one can have that highest type of realization. I'll close with just one quote from Swami Premananda, one of the, of course, direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. I tell you for a fact that I am not enamored of the mere ochre cloth. I want renunciation and dispassion. I very much appreciate the life of Nag Mahashay. He did not wear the ochre cloth, and yet what a great soul he was, and how great was his renunciation. When I visited Dhaka the last time, I went to Nag Mahashay's place before I left. One of his friends told me that a Brahmin used to come to his house and read from the Bhagavata. He would read a verse, and Nag Mahashay would expound for a long time. Pandits read the Bhagavata, but Nag Mahashay had actually realized the truths it contained, and they were therefore as vivid to him as any sensible object. So, this is one case. There are many other great householder disciples. There's a Balaram Bose, Girish, and so there's so many of them that they can all represent great ideals for us and can inspire us. And we really don't have to make that strong distinction, because we see they had more in common as householders and monks than they had difference from. So I thought I would say a few words about Nag Mahashay today. So let us sit in meditation for a few minutes.